Okay, hello everybody. My name is Kate from the Compass College Consulting, and every so often I'm going to have a little session where I just have a real chat with you. So this means that I'm not going to be trying to talk as fast as a train. I've got my little cup of tea, and I'm just going to talk to you in more of long form content. All right, it's in this nice, beautiful red mug. I think it's like vanilla spice chamomile tea. So, what is the tea today? Well, I'm going to be talking to you guys about my experience in a sorority. And I'm not going to say which sorority, don't even try looking it up on my social media. You're not going to find it. And that's just because I do want to preserve the integrity of the national sorority. I'm going to be saying a couple of things that I didn't really like. And I didn't have the most pleasant experience in sororities, but that's not true for everybody. So I don't want to ruin it for my other sisters in my chapter. I've had actually very good relationships with some of the alumni, and this is the same sorority that my mother was in. So I'm not going to ruin it for you guys. So let's dive into things. I know, looking at me, I'm blonde, I'm from the Midwest, I went to a big state school. Like, okay, at first appearance, I kind of seemed like I would be the ideal candidate for a sorority, but not really. I honestly never saw myself becoming a sorority girl. And it was only because my mother, she had had a really, really positive experience in her sorority when she was in college that I even felt like I should go through the recruitment process. So I'll tell you a little bit about what happened. So my mother, she went to a state school in Missouri, and it was only about 25% female. So that was a huge influence as to why she would want to live with other women. And so some of the other girls that were in her sorority, they ended up, having that lifelong friendship, becoming rocket scientists, having these super, super cool jobs and being really amazing people from all of them that I've actually gotten to meet. And they were like her maid of honor, bridesmaids at her wedding, everything that you kind of picture from a stereotypical sorority. And so my mother thought that it would be the same for me. Oh, I should also add, like, my mother, even to this day, on her license plate, she literally has like her chapter name, the initials for the sorority, and then her little pin number from when she was initiated. Like, she's 50, and this is still what's going on for her life. Um, so when I was going into college, how it starts is like the summer before you enter college, you have to actually go onto the Panhellenic resources page. And for a lot of schools, you actually have to like register and sign up. And I think that it costs about $500, I want to say, just to go through recruitment. And so I had convinced my roommate to do it with me. She and I were both like, this is so stupid. But my mother had told me, like, oh, you guys can do this together. My roommate in my first year of college was one of my friends from high school. And so she and I were best friends. And we were like, okay, this lets us move in a little bit earlier. We can miss all of the hecticness of the regular move-in day, and it would give us more time to like actually figure out our way around campus. And then if things were to go well, it's like, okay, sororities are broadcasted as being this big, wonderful thing where you can make all of these lifelong friends and have these other women to support you. And I also kind of liked the idea that there was community service. I did a lot of community service growing up, and so every single national sorority in the United States, they have a different nonprofit that they are associated with. And so that's called like their philanthropy. And so a lot of sororities, they'll actually volunteer with these groups. They'll set up fundraisers to help out with some of these nonprofits. And it's actually kind of a cute little system. Um, so during the summer, what my university asked me to do was I had to send in like a short video about myself. They sent in like a list of questions that we could answer in our video. And so I did that. I had to go through the registration process, and then I showed up on campus, I think on like August 14th. So it's like you move into your dorm about a week before everybody else does. Most other people just move in on like Saturday or Sunday before the first day of college, which for me was on a Tuesday. And then I think my 18th birthday was actually the next day. So I moved into college when I was 17. But if you're going through recruitment, you do it the weekend before. And so then recruitment is Monday through Friday. And then on Saturday, you actually receive your bid and then join your house. And it's great. You're, now a new recruit. So we had moved in. And then when everything started the next day, we had to go through like a little orientation introduction, sort of telling us like, oh, here are all of the houses that are available on your campus. I think I went to the University of Missouri, and I want to say there are like 20 different sororities on campus. It could be less than that, but it's somewhere between 15 and 20. Um, and then the way that it works is you are called a PNM. And so that's a potential new member, right? So you are with all of these other girls and you're all vying for the same spots. And so each house is a little bit different, and it depends on the actual physical size of the house as to how many people they could take in. I know my house could take in about 80 new people every single year, but there were probably like 3,000 girls that were trying out for these spots. So it's a lot of people. And so then you have sent in the video. The girls at the actual houses, they have already decided, like, oh, we really don't like these girls. We really like these girls. And they already have kind of like a list depending on some of your videos. And then what we did for the first day was we just got to stay at our dorms, and every single sorority house, they had actually created a promotional video talking about themselves. They showed videos of the house. They talked about their philanthropy. They talked about different activities that happened throughout the year. And so then we actually got to rank which ones we liked the most. So I want to say that it was that we eliminated several. Actually, now that I think about it, I think that we had about 16 houses. And so it was like for that first day, we could choose 10 houses and rank them in the order that we wanted them. And so this was true every day. So every day was a different round of recruitment. And so at the end of each day, we would rank the houses that we went to. And so then on their end, they would also have to rank us. And so then the ones that matched up, those are the ones that you would still have on your list the next day. And every single day, the list shortened by like 2 to 3 houses up until Friday, where you only have 2 houses left. And then on Saturday, one of those 2 houses chooses you. Either that or you get cut. So then how it worked was after we had ranked the houses that first day, then every single day for the rest of the week, so Monday through Friday, we showed up for a meeting at about 7:30 each morning. They sort of went over what are you going to be doing, and then we were given our lists. So some girls in that first day, they only had like 5 houses that had actually taken them out of the 10 that they had put on their list, and that was all just based on their videos. I want to say that I had 7 or 8, and then some girls actually had the full 10. So then it was broken up where there were about 10 blocks of time throughout the day. So each block was about 45 minutes long. So some girls that day, on the first day, they were visiting 10 different houses, which took about 10 hours. It's wild. And so then all day long, the actual girls that are in the sororities, they're putting on these presentations, introducing you to the house. And then, so the format for most days, whenever you show up to the house, is they'll have like a brief overview at the beginning from the house's president, so from that sorority president, and then you'll actually be set up with about 2 to 3 girls from each house, and they'll do like a mini interview with you. And each day is themed a little bit differently with the information that's being shared and what questions are asked during the interview. So I think for like the first 2 days, it was about friendship and sisterhood. And it was like, what are you looking for in a friend? You know, why do you want to join this house? What do you like about us? How would you treat your fellow sisters? And then like Wednesday and Thursday, it was talking about the philanthropy. And so they would ask you about your volunteer experience. They would ask you if you had a connection. And then I'm not sure what was on Friday. I think that that's where they get into sort of the rituals for that house. And they show you like, this is what it would actually be like if you made it into our chapter. So fun story, I was cut after Thursday, so I did not visit anywhere on Friday. I got the day off to just sleep and rest and recuperate. So every day, your groups that you're going with get smaller and smaller and smaller. And I will say, I personally thought that recruitment was kind of fun. Going into it, since I had already been kind of wary about it, I wasn't too excited, but going and doing interviews all day long and meeting other girls that I could potentially be friends with, that actually made me feel a lot more comfortable with the process. I know on my first day, the house that I ended up joining, I had talked to this one girl, and I think that we had talked about like menstrual health and feminine hygiene and sort of advocacy for those things. And we had like really, really clicked. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, I wish I could be having these conversations with people all day. But I will also say there were a lot of conversations that I had with people where I was like, how on earth did you actually make it in? Like, if this is a competitive process, what did somebody see in you? And there were definitely a lot of girls that were like the typical sorority girls that you think of from Legally Blondes that I honestly don't know how they made it to college. But I'm happy to say that most people were just like average human beings, and there was nothing particularly special and there was nothing particularly dumb and blonde about them, right? Most girls, I was just like, okay, we don't click, and that's fine. Um, and so then during the process, you're also led around by an actual member of one of the sororities, and they don't tell you which sorority they're from up until the very end, but you find out. And it's also kind of fun because you get to like actually give back to the Panhellenic Society if you choose to do that and you're selected to do that and lead around potential new members. And so then throughout the week, I was visiting these houses. By the end, I was like, this might actually be kind of nice. And then when I was cut, I was actually kind of sad. I will say there were a lot of girls that were like in the bathrooms crying and bawling their eyes out, thinking like, "Oh my goodness, how could I have not made it in?" And it's like, it's just a sorority. I'm not sure what the big deal is. And so then after I was cut, my roommate had already been cut like several days earlier, and we were like, "Yep, we're chilling. This is cool." So then on Saturday morning, I had gotten a bunch of phone calls at 5 a.m., but I don't usually keep my ringer on, so I had no idea what was going on. And then I woke up by like 8 or 9 to see text messages saying like, "Oh, you're a snap bid for the house that I ended up joining." And so what that is if you had made it pretty far and somebody still wanted you, but somebody else that they had wanted didn't actually pair up with that little list that we had to fill out, ranking each place that we had gone to each day, then they would move on to people on like that. It's essentially a wait list. That's the most easy way to explain it. And so I had woken up too late to actually participate in the ceremony. So what my university did was you would all go out to the football field or some other arena, like a track field or a basketball field, something like that. And then all of the girls from the sororities are standing on one side, and then all of the potential new members are on the other side. And so then you're given an envelope, and it has the name of your sorority that you're going to join in it. And so you don't know which of the two sororities it's going to be. So then you open up your envelope and then you run towards the sorority that chose you. And usually some girl comes up and like starts, and all of that. I missed that. I just saw pictures of it. So then I did go over to my house. They usually have like a huge party that's going on where there's some theme. Ours was like Lucky Charms. So everybody was dressed in green, and there was an entire pool that was like filled with little Lucky Charms, like a kiddie pool. And then there are places for you to take pictures, and it's kind of just everybody is excited and happy, and you're given like a little buddy to go around with who's sort of going to teach you about the sorority. So I only went there for an hour or two, and then I was like, oh no, what did I get myself into? And so it was the same sorority that my mother had been in. So I called her and I told her, and she was like beyond excited. She paid all my membership dues that day. Now, thankfully, it was the cheapest sorority to be in. But that's the thing with sororities. It's like it's only a thing for people who have that kind of money. And some sororities, they'll charge upwards of $10,000 a year just to be a part of their sorority. And that's on top of tuition. So by the end of your 4 years, you paid $40,000 to be a part of this sorority. And so then after that, we spent the next, I want to say 9 or 10 weeks studying. So once a week, all of us who were the potential new members, we would go and meet with girls from the sorority that were sort of designated to train us. And so we would learn, what's the history of the sorority nationally, what is our philanthropy, all of these little details and things like that. And then you have 3 rituals during the process. So there's first degree, second degree, and your actual initiation. And no, it's not like some weird, people wearing sheets over their heads and candles and being hazed and stuff like that. Like our university was very, very strict about the fact that hazing is not allowed. And my university had actually had a situation with one of the fraternities the year before I was on campus where one of the fraternities had been hazing some of their brothers. And so then this one kid, he was stupid, and he drank half a bottle of vodka in one night. And he ended up being hospitalized, and he lost all control of his body from pretty much here down. So he was permanently, like, his body is permanently destroyed for the rest of his life because of that. So our university really, really cracked down on that. Um, so thankfully, I didn't face anything within the sorority that even remotely resembled hazing. Um, but then, yeah, so we were going through our training, and about once a month, so like in September and then October, and then at the end of October, that's when all of the ceremonies were. And so we all had to wear white dresses, and then the actual members, they would sing like a little song for the sorority, and they would give us, a flower or a pin or something like that, and say, "You made it to the next stage." And then when it's actually time for initiation, they drove us over to this hotel, and it was an entire ceremony with these different, sacred objects for the sorority. And it's kind of silly, it feels kind of cool in the moment, but then when you think back on it, it's really silly. And afterwards, everybody's just taking pictures. So that's really the whole point. So during this time, I was kind of trying to make friends within the sorority, but it was really kind of difficult. And then there was a scenario where I kind of isolated myself and started to make enemies. And that was because all of the potential new members in my recruitment round, so we were, the class of 2026. And so we had like a big Snapchat group chat. And that was great and fine. And like we could all communicate and say, like, "Oh, hey, there were things going on here and here, and you know, who needs help studying?" Like all the things that you think of when you're thinking about joining like a group of other women, all the benefits that you're supposed to get. But then most of the time, what ended up happening was it was just two or three girls sending us pictures all the time using Snapchat. And I don't know if they were trying to do this for streaks or if they were showing off or what. But it was like one girl just kept up on sending us pictures of this guy's bed and like different men that she was sleeping with. It's a group chat of like 80 people, and none of us really knew each other that well because we were all brand new at college and brand new within the sorority. And I was just like, this is inappropriate. So I forget what exactly happened and like who initiated it, but I eventually texted in the group chat and I was like, "Hey, could we maybe just keep it PG? We don't need to see people's pictures and stuff like this." And so then that girl got pissed, and there was an app, I forget what it's even called, but it's like where everybody within a certain vicinity can see all the messages that are posted, and then they go away within 24 hours. So it's like a big gossip forum for colleges primarily. And so this girl like posted on there saying that I was a bitch and you're not supposed to identify anybody or use swear words. So then there was like a big emergency meeting called with the sorority. And and so then none of us really knew what was going on. And then afterwards, people came up to me and they were telling me, like, "Oh, Kate, are you okay?" Like, I was like, how many times has somebody called me a bitch in my life? Like, if I was upset over that, like, who cares? That's kind of just a fact of life, is that not everybody is going to like you and people are going to call you things. And I was like, you know what? At the very least, she stopped sending us these photos that we didn't need to see. And I hope that by now she's learned that that's not necessarily an appropriate thing to do. But after that, it definitely became harder to make friends. A lot of people buddied up within that first month or so, and I didn't really buddy up with people. Part of the problem was that I had a long distance relationship at the time. So when everybody was like hanging out on the weekends and sort of getting together, I was always like driving out to see him because he lived about 5-ish hours away. So that's definitely something that I regret. And I kind of wonder if my experiences would have been different if I wouldn't have been in that relationship. Thank goodness I'm not in it anymore. um, but then I just became more and more disenthused. And I realized like I had no friends. My mother had paid all of this money, and I wasn't super impressed with the other girls that were in the sorority. And I was like, what is this even for? Then also, while we were going through this education training, it was homecoming. And so the University of Missouri invented homecoming, which is kind of cool. That also means that they take it very, very seriously, like more seriously than anybody should ever take homecoming. And so we were all required by the sorority, or we would get in trouble and be punished and not be allowed to attend events if we didn't put in at least 30 hours of work. into homecoming decorations. So that meant like a float, doing dances, doing fundraisers, things like that. And so I had contributed to our fundraiser. I had like worked a couple of hours on painting and decorating the float. But I realized like, okay, I'm taking 18 credit hours, or I forget if I was taking 18 credit hours my first semester. But anyway, it was like my dorm was on the farthest side of campus away from the frat house where we were decorating these things. So it was a good 45-minute walk just to get over there. Then I was working multiple jobs at once. I was trying to get situated with my academics, and I was running an organization. So I was like, I literally cannot do this. I'm involved in too many things. Oh, and I was also in several other clubs. I was like, the sorority is not going to contribute to my academic success. It's not going to contribute to my professional success either. So I cannot like physically spend 30 hours this month working on these stupid decorations. So I think at that point I kind of just broke down and I was like, how do I quit? I'm not initiated yet. How do I quit? But I found out that because my mother had already paid my fees, I legally could not quit. Otherwise, I would not be considered a member of the sorority, and I would not receive like any refunds, any alumni status, anything. Like it was just wasted money. So at that point, I decided like, okay, sorority is going to take a back seat. I'm just not going to do this. They ended up not fining me, and I was able to explain like, here are all the other things that I'm doing, and so they were okay with it. And that ended up being my excuse to like pretty much not be involved in anything with the sorority ever. And so what I would do then is I would just go to the sorority house for meals because we have a chef that cooked 3 meals a day. So I didn't have to use money that was on my dining hall pass. And then I would play their piano there because I was a music minor during my first year of school and nobody else was ever using the piano. People actually really loved me playing piano. So it was kind of nice. Like I always had an audience to practice in front of, and it was a really, really lovely grand piano. So that was like the biggest benefit of being in the sorority, in my opinion. And then as time continued on, there just grew to be more drama. So in sororities, you usually have a social about once per month. So that's whenever you see other girls that you knew from high school, like posting pictures on Instagram of them dressing up in all of these formal outfits or like in these costumes and posting with all their sorority sisters. And I thought like, oh, these socials are supposed to be everybody gets together and you maybe like dance a little bit and you talk. And what I found out is like, no, actually, every single social, you've already paid like thousands of dollars to be part of the sorority, but now you get to pay an extra $20 to $50 to participate in each social. And then it's literally just you get on a bus to go over to a bar or a winery. Like you dress up to go to a winery or bar, and that's it, right? And then you sit there and participate in underage drinking. And you're not allowed to purchase any of the alcohol to take back with you. You're not allowed to be drinking on the bus or if you've been drunk on the bus, because then that violates the law. And then that also violates Panhellenic standards. And so it's like, I just thought that it was just this complete double standard. And I didn't really drink during my first year of college, but I was like, we're literally paying to go illegally get drunk, and this is how we're socializing with our sisters. So I was just very disenfranchised by all of that. So I went to our first 2 socials, and then we have like this ball that happens in December. And that's when I became the most angry with these stupid events, was because I had gotten my boyfriend that was the long distance boyfriend that lived 5 hours away to come all the way because he could bring a date, go with me to this ball, thinking that it would be like prom. I brought my prom dress from high school. We went to this winery, and I thought like, oh, it's going to be wine tasting for the people who are over 21, which let's remember is like barely 30% of anybody in any sorority in college. And then the rest of it will be, dancing, photo booths, fun things like that. Like I thought there would actually be something to do, and there was not. It was literally just you sat in this tent because it was freezing cold outside in December with your fancy outfits and drink wine. Which now looking back on it, like now that I do drink wine, it's like that would have been awesome. But I was not going to get a fake ID. I was not going to risk doing any of that and doing something illegal. So it was like you could not participate unless you were willing to break the law. And I really, really did not appreciate that. And I even tried contacting our alumni who are real adults that were supposed to be in charge. And I had tried, telling my mother about this, and she had tried contacting people, but they were just like, you know what? This is how things are done. what people think are fun or think is fun in college, so we're just gonna let it slide. And, maybe I was kind of a stickler looking back on it, but it was just that, that kind of sorority life was not for me. Then there was one other situation in the fall. So every single week, you're required to go to a 1 to 2 hour long chapter meeting. And once again, you get in trouble if you don't go. So it was like a $25 fine. But I even had to like look up, is that legally possible for somebody to fine you for not going to a sorority meeting? It's so stupid. Um, but first of all, there are a couple of stories about these lovely chapter meetings. So most of it is just supposed to be to discuss like what is the sorority actually doing? What are the upcoming events? Who needs to volunteer at which things? And then we would also have at the beginning like a sisterhood spotlight. So that meant that throughout the week, you could submit anonymously to this little survey form saying like, oh, hey, Christina got an A on her test this week. And then everybody would clap and, cheer, yay, Christina. Or, Sophia, she just got an internship. Brianna, she just got into nursing school. It was supposed to be like uplifting things, and sometimes it would be. But what it ended up being was two girls would go to the front of this room in front of a chapter of 250 women, all in one room. So we don't even necessarily all know each other. It was a giant PowerPoint presentation on a 30-foot screen, and people would just submit their friends' hookup stories from the week. So, like, one week we got a story that was like, Nicole had her first ginger this week. Or one time, there was a girl that she submitted a story saying that she had been hooking up with this guy. She had just taken him back to her dorm room or her apartment, wherever it was. And then he ended up breaking his ankle. And like after they had had sex, they were like, he was in the shower. He broke his ankle in the shower. And then she had to drive him to the hospital. Like her one night stand, she drove him to the hospital. And this is what they felt was appropriate to tell us in a group of 250 random women. So at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm done. These are not the people that I want to be friends with for life. And that's not to say that like everybody was bad or, slutty. At meals, I would try to come by most days at the very least for breakfast or lunch so I could practice piano. And I would talk to a couple of girls. There were a couple of fun events, like we made bread. We made kava around the time of Hanukkah. We did have some philanthropy events, although they had made it sound like the philanthropy stuff was going to be the primary focus of the sorority. And I was really, really in touch with the philanthropy that we were involved with. And I was like, oh, great, this is like a built-in way to stay involved with this organization that I had been a part of as a kid. And then it turned out to be that like it was a one-day thing every 3 months. So I was like, wow, so much for all of this. So much for actually being able to volunteer and get involved in college. So I did participate in all of those. That was kind of fun. I just wish that we would have had more of a public service focus so that it would have had more of a real benefit in my life. But yeah, I would talk to some of the girls, and some girls were really nice. And it was kind of nice to be like walking down the sidewalks of your college campus and see other girls from your sorority. And at the very least, they would always like wave and say hi. But otherwise, I wouldn't say that my sorority was anything to be proud of or anything that I would have paid money like that again to be involved in. And I really realized this in November whenever I went to my mother's chapter. So her chapter was celebrating, I want to say like their 50th or 75th anniversary, something like that. And so they all gathered together. And then I was able to see what her chapter was like and talk to some of the girls that were involved right now who were also my same age in college. And they were awesome. They were all down to earth. They were not talking about like having sex with guys with red hair and posting it up on this giant PowerPoint. They had a nicer looking house. They all just like really cared about academics. They were very close knit, very kind. And honestly, like I broke down at that event whenever I realized like I'm at college and I've not been able to make really any real friends in my chapter, but now I can see just how good it could have been. It sort of made me start thinking maybe I should have gone to college at that university instead. My little brother is there now. He just moved in this past week before I filmed this. But what could my life have looked like? And it made me realize like sororities are not awful. It would have been a great experience had I gone to that school and been with that group of girls. It was just more about like I chose a school that was not necessarily the right environment for me. And then I will say there are some benefits now of being an alumni. Pretty much what happened to me was I ended up studying school remotely during my second year of college, and then I graduated after my second year. So if you stay a member, like technically they can't kick you out of the sorority for not living on campus because there are girls who will do study abroad for a semester. And what I was doing was essentially the equivalent of that. And so I now have gained alumni status now that I graduated. And that has honestly been a much, much better experience than me actually being there on campus. So I'm not going to say like being in a sorority is going to be the make or break thing for a job. You're not just going to be walking up to, the interview for your dream job and saying like, oh, hey, I was an alpha, beta, sigma, delta, tri, whatever. And they're just going to be like, I was too. The chances of that are so low, right? It's also not going to be like, oh, hey, I was my sorority president. So clearly I have tons of leadership experience and you should accept me for this job. In the grand scheme of life, like people don't actually care about your leadership positions in a sorority. So if you are in a sorority, like I would not recommend getting super, super involved because that's going to take up literally all of your time when you could have been applying to internships and having actual jobs and like being in more academic clubs that are more broadly accepted by employers as being relevant. But what I will tell you is that when I moved to San Francisco, because there's this huge alumni network of, I think, over 100,000 women across the United States, I was able to message the lady who runs like our little mentorship program on LinkedIn for our sorority nationwide. And she turned out to be like this awesome, awesome woman who advises startups here in San Francisco. So my second week of living here in California, I was able to just like walk up to her and we had forget if it was like lunch or dinner or a snack, something like that. And she was like, yes, let me give you all of this advice about California. And if you ever want to start your own business and just on a personal level, like, I'm here for you and you can give me a call if you need anything. And that was like really reassuring. So moving across the country and being on my own, I knew like, okay, at the very least, I have my women from my sorority and they've got my back because that idea of sisterhood, it's like, even if you're not best friends in real life, even if you don't necessarily know each other super well, you have this common shared bond and you're supposed to protect each other. So interacting with women who are older than me, who are involved in the sorority has been really, really great. And I've had women like at my church growing up, in my community, here in San Francisco, in a women's philanthropy organization that I'm involved in, they've all been members of my sorority. And so then they're like, yes, Kate, we want to protect you, come join us. So that has been the silver lining. But overall, once again, I kind of think that sororities, like it's a lot of time that you spend not really doing anything. So I would recommend for you is if you are going to join a sorority, make an effort to like actually make friends within the sorority so that these can be your true sisters for life that sort of breach that level of blood, actually make these people your best friends, put in more effort than I did.